How many secrets can hide behind a closed bedroom door before they start eating you alive? From the inside, I've spent 50 years wondering about that, my dears. We tell ourselves that love is visible, that betrayal would somehow announce itself with flashing lights and sirens. But the truth I learned is far more brutal. Sometimes the people closest to us are living entire lives we never knew existed, right there in the space between what they say and what they do. When you're living through it, you're blind to it. You see what you want to see. You believe what makes you feel safe. And by the time the truth arrives, when it crashes through your carefully constructed world, like a wrecking ball, it's almost too late to put anything back together. I'm Rosemary Claire Ashworth, and I'm 74 years old now. This story happened in 1989. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Your stories mean everything to me. Hartwell was the kind of small English village where everyone knew everyone's business, or so we thought. Population 3,000. Stone cottages with thatched roofs. A village green with a Norman church at its center. My husband, David Christopher Ashworth, was the headmaster of Hartwell Primary School. He was 49 years old in 1989, distinguished looking with silver threading through his dark hair, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits. Everyone respected David. The vicar consulted him on church matters. The mayor sought his counsel. Parents trusted him completely with their children's futures. We lived in the headmaster's cottage, a beautiful Victorian home provided by the school. It had a black front door with brass fixtures, climbing roses across the stone facade, and tall sash windows that looked out onto the school grounds. I could watch the children playing from my kitchen window while I prepared dinner. Our 3 children were Thomas, age 14, Margaret, age 11, and young William, age 8. Thomas was captain of the school's cricket team, clever with numbers, already talking about studying mathematics at university. Margaret was artistic. She won the art competition 3 years running. William was the sweetheart of the family, curious about everything, always asking questions about how the world worked. We were, by every measure that mattered, the perfect family. Every Sunday, we sat in the front pew at St. Catherine's Church. My Victoria sponge cakes were famous in the village. I was chairwoman of the Women's Institute. David had been awarded an ode 2 years prior for his contributions to education. Other women envied me. They saw my life and thought, that is what I want. That is security. That is love. My best friend was Catherine Winters. We had known each other since we were 17 years old, since Secretarial College. Catherine was tall, elegant, and divorced, which in 1989 was still somewhat scandalous in a place like Hartwell. But Catherine didn't care what people thought. She lived in a cottage near the village green and worked as a freelance translator. She was at our home constantly. The children called her Aunt Catherine. She was part of the fabric of our family. David and Catherine had been close friends for over a decade. They would discuss books and philosophy while I prepared tea. I thought it was perfectly innocent. I thought it was wonderful that my husband had a friend who shared his intellectual interests, because I, frankly, did not. I was a practical woman. I managed the household, raised the children, volunteered in the community. David and Catherine discussed Sartre and Camus. Little did I know. Looking back now, I can identify the exact moment things began to shift. Though I was too blind or too willing to be blind to see it clearly at the time. It started in March 1989 with a simple locked drawer in David's study. The study was his sanctuary, a room lined with books, with a mahogany desk facing the window that overlooked his beloved school. I entered it rarely. He preferred his privacy, and I respected that. But one afternoon, I was dusting, and I noticed the bottom drawer of his desk was locked. It had never been locked before. "David," I asked at dinner, "why have you locked your desk drawer?" He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Private correspondence, Rose, personal matters. Nothing for you to worry about." "Of course," I said, and I didn't ask again. But something had shifted inside my chest. A small, tight feeling. A warning I didn't want to heed. Then came the late meetings at school. Special committee work. David explained. The district wants to implement new curriculum standards. I'm leading the initiative. Evening meetings, I'm afraid. Several per week. These meetings fell on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Always these nights. And always he returned looking flushed, energized, with a particular smell clinging to him, something like Catherine's perfume. Chanel No. 5. Sweet and musky. "You've been at the school?" I asked once when he came home, trying to keep my voice casual. "Of course," he said. "Where else would I be?" But in April, I called the school office. There were no evening meetings, no committee work. The secretary had no record of any such meetings. When I asked David about it, he said, "Oh, Rose, I misspoke. The meetings were canceled last month. Didn't I tell you?" I thought I'd mentioned it. I hadn't believed him, but I had pretended to believe him. And isn't that just another form of lying? By May, Catherine had stopped coming to our home. She had excuses, always plausible ones. A project deadline, a translating job that required her full attention. She was going to visit her sister in Cornwall. "I do miss Catherine," I said to David one evening. He replied, absorbed in his newspaper. "Yes, she's been busy. In June, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. A receipt for a hotel in the next county, the Riverside Inn. A room for 2 nights. The dates were from a Tuesday and Wednesday in May. When David had told me he was at an educational conference, I held that receipt in my shaking hands for a very long time. July 2nd, 1989. A Tuesday evening. David had told me he was working late at school. I believed him because by that point I had trained myself to believe whatever he told me. It was easier than acknowledging what I was beginning to suspect. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner beef Wellington, which was David's favorite, when the telephone rang. I picked it up. "Hello." "Oh," a woman's voice said, not Catherine's voice. Someone younger. "I'm sorry. I was trying to reach David Ashworth. This is a private matter." Something in my chest went very, very cold. "This is Mrs. Ashworth," I said carefully. "Who is calling?" There was a pause. "I've dialed the wrong number," the woman said quickly, and she hung up. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, and I understood with absolute and terrible clarity that I had been living a lie. I didn't confront him that evening. Instead, I waited. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who observed her husband, like a detective observing a suspect. I noticed how he was always grooming himself on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, how he took extra care with his appearance, how he applied aftershave, not his usual brute, but something else, something fresher, something that reminded me of springtime and infidelity. On July 12th, Margaret came to me with a piece of paper she'd found in the back garden. "Mum," she said, "I found this. It's torn, but look, it has Dad's name." It was a letter, badly water-damaged, but still legible. The handwriting was elegant. Feminine. David. "My love, tonight was impossible. You know we can't keep doing this. We can't keep lying to them. It's destroying me. I love you. I can't live like this anymore. We need to make a decision. Soon, before everything falls apart. C.C. Catherine. The world tilted. I sent Margaret upstairs, and I called my oldest friend, Susan Mitchell, who lived in the neighboring village. Susan had known David and me for 20 years. She was practical, loyal, and unsentimental, exactly what I needed in that moment. "Susan," I said, my voice strange to my own ears, "I need your help. I need to know something terrible." I met her at a cafe in the next town. I showed her the letter. I told her about the locked drawer, the fictitious meetings, the hotel receipt, the phone call from the woman whose name I didn't know. "We need to see what's in that drawer." Susan said simply, "That night, after David fell asleep, I went into his study with a knitting needle and a butter knife. It took me 15 minutes to pick the lock, 15 minutes of my hands shaking so badly. I could barely grip the tools. Inside the drawer was a stack of letters. 23 letters, all from Catherine. I read them hunched over the desk by lamplight while my husband slept upstairs. The earliest letter was dated November 1988, just 8 months prior. It began, Asterisk, I never thought I could feel this way about anyone. I never knew I was capable of such betrayal, such deceit, such complete abandonment of morality. But every moment with you is worth the price of my soul. Asterisk, by February 1989. Catherine was writing about leaving Hartwell, about running away with David, about starting a new life together. By June, the letters had become increasingly desperate and demanding. Asterisk, you promised me you would tell her. You promised me by June. She doesn't deserve you, David. I deserve you. We could be so happy. Please, please tell her. Choose me. Choose us. Choose a real life instead of this performance you call marriage. Asterisk beneath the letters. I found something else. A ledger. A meticulous account of David's finances that made absolutely no sense. Money going places I didn't recognize. Large sums. Thousands of pounds. I did the accounting in my head, and I realized my husband had liquidated our savings. £50,000. Gone. I don't remember very clearly what happened next. I remember sitting on the floor of his study. I remember the sound I made, not crying, but something deeper, something primal. The sound of a woman whose entire world had just imploded. By morning, my face was swollen from crying. I looked like someone who had been hit. I confronted David in the kitchen after the children left for school. I found the letters. I said simply. His face went completely pale. He looked suddenly much older than his 49 years. Rose, you liquidated our savings. £50,000. Where has it gone? Into planning our future, he said quietly. Catherine's future. Our future together. You're going to leave your family, your children, for Catherine Winters. I don't know yet, he said. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't. I can't pretend anymore. I can't live this lie. I love her, Rose. I love her in a way I've never loved you. In a way I didn't know was possible. I slapped him. I had never slapped anyone in my life before that moment. But I slapped him across the face as hard as I could. Get out, I said. Get out of this house. He didn't argue. Within 2 hours, he had packed a bag and left. The news traveled through Hartwell like wildfire. David was immediately suspended from his position as headmaster pending an investigation. The school discovered that he had been misusing school funds. As well, approximately £8,000 had been diverted into accounts he controlled. Catherine was questioned and subsequently moved away from the village within a week. I became the objects of pity and suspicion simultaneously. Pity because I had been publicly humiliated. Suspicion because some people believed I must have done something to drive my husband away. That I had been a neglectful wife, a cold woman, a failure in some fundamental way. Margaret Hutchins, the mayor's wife, was particularly cruel. Well, she said loudly at the Women's Institute, knowing I would hear her. If my marriage was failing, I certainly wouldn't be sitting around organizing flower rangers. I'd be paying more attention to my husband. The implication was clear. David's infidelity was my fault. I lost my position as chairwoman of the Women's Institute. I received a note saying that it would be better for everyone if I stepped back. Given my personal circumstances, within 6 weeks, the school district offered me a choice: resign quietly with a modest severance, or stay and be publicly fired in a disciplinary hearing. I chose to resign. My children suffered terribly. Thomas, at 14, was mortified. His father was the headmaster of his school, and now that same father was being investigated for financial crimes. Thomas stopped eating lunch in the school cafeteria. He stopped going to cricket matches. He became someone I didn't recognize: withdrawn, angry, ashamed. Margaret, age 11, lost her friendships overnight. The parents of her friends didn't want their children associating with that girl. You know, the headmaster's daughter, whose father ran off with Will. You know, William kept asking where his father was. When is Daddy coming home? He would ask every evening. Did Daddy stop loving us? How do you answer that question? How do you tell a child that their father loved someone else more than he loved them? I had no income. I had no job prospects. The scandal had made me unemployable in Hartwell. I had a mortgage on the headmaster's cottage, though the school gave me 6 months to vacate. I had 3 children to feed. David sent money sporadically. Sometimes it came, often it didn't. I started taking in laundry. Wealthy women from the neighboring villages would drop off their delicate clothing, silk blouses, wool jumpers, designer pieces, and I would wash them by hand in my kitchen, iron them meticulously, and deliver them back pristine. I charged £5 per garment. Some weeks I made £70. It was survival, barely. I started baking again, something I hadn't done since my days before marriage. I baked Victoria sponge, lemon drizzle cake, shortbread. Susan helped me sell them at the farmer's market. By word of mouth, I began taking orders from local cafes. A small cafe called the Holloway took 24 biscuits per week. The tea room near the church took a Victoria sponge every Thursday. By November 1989, I was earning approximately £40 to £50 per week from baking. Combined with the laundry, I was making perhaps £200 per week. My mortgage was £280 per month. Utilities were another 50. Food for 3 growing children was another 120. I was consistently short by £150 per month. I took a job cleaning houses. I cleaned for 6 families in Hartwell and the neighboring villages. 2 hours per family per week. £24 per week. It was demeaning. I had been the headmaster's wife, and now I was scrubbing other women's toilets, but I did it anyway. My hands became rough and cracked from constant exposure to harsh cleaning chemicals and hot water. I developed painful calluses. By the winter of 1989, my hands were unrecognizable red, swollen, with deep fissures that would bleed if I wasn't careful. I was 38 years old, and I looked 50. I would cry in the pantry while my children did their homework. I would cry while hanging laundry in the garden. I would cry in the shower so that the sound of water would mask my sobs. There were nights I didn't sleep. I would lie awake calculating. If I charged £6 per garment for laundry and took in 30 garments per week, that would be £180. If I sold baking for £70 per week, and cleaning brought in £24 per week, that was £274 per week, multiplied by 4 weeks. That was roughly £1,000 per month. My expenses were £950 per month. I could survive with approximately £50 per month to spare. Survival was possible. Life was not dull in the spring of 1990. Something shifted. I received a letter from David. He was in Liverpool. He had married Catherine in a small registry office ceremony. They were expecting a child. He couldn't pay child support. They were struggling to. I read that letter, and I felt nothing. I was too exhausted to feel anything. By 1991, my baking business had begun to expand beyond the small cafes. A woman named Mrs. Eleanor Davies, who owned a small shop near the village green, approached me about selling baked goods on consignment. She would take anything I could produce: bread, cakes, biscuits, and split the profit with me 50-50. By 1992, I was producing baked goods in Mrs. Davies's commercial kitchen 3 days per week. I had stopped taking in laundry. I had stopped the house cleaning. My hands were finally beginning to heal. By 1993, I had established myself as Rosemary's Home Baking, and I was supplying 5 shops and 3 restaurants throughout the county. I was earning £800 to £1,000 per month. The house mortgage was paid. The children were fed. We were no longer in crisis mode. The moment came on a Saturday in September 1993 outside the village post office. I was posting a package biscuits for a customer in the next county when Margaret Hutchins, the mayor's wife, emerged from the post office at precisely the wrong moment. She saw me. I saw her. There was a moment of awkward pause. "Rosemary," she said with a thin smile. "How resourceful of you. I see your biscuits at the Holloway. Quite popular, I hear." Something hardened in me at that moment. The woman who had publicly humiliated me, who had implied that I had deserved my husband's betrayal, was now trying to make small talk. "They are popular," I said firmly. "In fact, I'm expanding into the next 3 villages. The demand is exceeding what I can produce alone. I'm hiring an assistant baker next month." Margaret's smile faltered. Before she could respond, Mrs. Eleanor Davies emerged from the post office behind me. She was 70 years old, one of the most respected women in Hartwell. She had known my family for decades. "Margaret," Mrs. Davies said calmly, "I think it's time someone reminded you that Rosemary did nothing wrong. Her husband betrayed her, and rather than showing compassion, you have spent the past 4 years making her life more difficult. I find that shameful." Margaret's face went red. She left without another word. Mrs. Davies took my arm. "Come have tea with me," she said. "We have things to discuss." Over tea in her sitting room, Mrs. Davies offered me something that would change my life: a commercial property. She owned a small building near the village green, a former bakery that had been closed for 2 years. She offered me a 10-year lease at a very reasonable rate. "I believe in what you're building," she said simply. "Let me help you build it properly." By 1995, Rosemary's Home Baking had 3 employees and a small storefront in the building Mrs. Davies had leased me. We were supplying baked goods to 15 restaurants and shops throughout the county. By 1997, we had expanded to 23 accounts. By 2000, I was employing 8 people and running a legitimate commercial bakery business. Thomas went to university in 1995, studying mathematics at Cambridge, exactly as he had dreamed. He became an actuary, and a very successful one. Margaret studied art at the Royal College of Art and became an art teacher. William studied business at Oxford and eventually took over the operations of my bakery, expanding it into a chain with locations in 5 different towns. My grandchildren arrived. Thomas had 2 daughters. Margaret had 1 son and 1 daughter. William had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. My home, which had once felt filled with silence and shame, became filled with the sounds of joy and laughter. In 2003, I was awarded a Small Business Achievement Award by the County Council. I was featured in a small article in the local paper. The headline read, "From Hardship to Success: The Story of Rosemary Ashworth." In that article, I was quoted as saying, I learned that sometimes the people we love most hurt us most deeply. But I also learned that our pain doesn't have to become our identity. We get to decide what comes next. In 2005, Mrs. Eleanor Davies passed away. She left me something in her will, not just the building, but the deed to the property itself. She left me a letter to Dear Rosemary. By the time you read this, I will be gone. But I want you to know that I saw you. I saw your strength, your determination, your refusal to accept that your circumstances define your worth. I'm leaving you this building because you've already earned it through your character and your perseverance. Live well. You deserve happiness. I wept for days after reading that letter. David died in 2008. Alone, Catherine had left him in 2002 apparently. Once the excitement of the affair wore off, so did the love. He lived by himself in Liverpool, estranged from his children, unknown to his grandchildren. By all accounts, he died a lonely and bitter man. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard he was gone. I felt only a gentle relief. The last threads of my old life had finally been severed. I was completely free. Looking back now from the vantage point of 74 years, I understand something I couldn't have understood at 38. Strength isn't something you're born with, my dears. It's something you build moment by moment, day by day, choice by choice. When everything else is taken from you, when your marriage collapses and your community abandons you, and you're scrubbing other women's toilets to feed your children, that's when true strength emerges. I learned that the worst things that happen to us don't have to be the things that define us. Yes, David's betrayal devastated me. Yes, I suffered. Yes, my children suffered. But we didn't stay broken. We rebuilt. We thrived. We became stronger than we ever would have been if everything had stayed perfect. And perhaps that's the secret that no one tells you. Sometimes the life you're forced to build after everything falls apart is far more beautiful than the life you were living before. Thank you for listening to me today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel so you don't miss our next stories. Share with someone who might be needing a little hope. Where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments. Take care of yourselves, my dears. You're far stronger than you know. Rosemary Claire Ashworth Hartwell, England, September 2023.